from NEF company. So the Minister of Finance, Mehmet Şimşek, honored us being here. I would like to invite him to the floor. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished members of the press, I would like to say welcome to the Uludag summit. Unfortunately, I am delivering the closing speeches, but I am quite happy to be with all of you in the closing session of Uludag Economy Summit. I know that everybody is today speaking about the fluctuations in the exchange rates, and we are speaking about the fluctuations that we have in the exchange rates in Turkey. But in my presentation, I will try to provide you a general perspective. Yesterday, Deputy Prime Minister here touched upon those problems and those challenges. Of course, what is happening in the global, foreign exchange market is not a surprise, because the European Union is struggling with the deflation, and the Japanese are also struggling with the deflation. And on the other hand, in the United States market, there is a much more dynamism. The dollar is actually gaining value every single day. The real effective exchange rate of dollars has been increased 17%. It is such a dramatic increase for US dollar. And there is underlying reasons for that, because the internal dynamics of the US dollars contributed to such an increase. But apart from that, in the other regions of the world, like Europe and the Eurozone, such negative impacts contributed to the increase in the value of the US dollar. Let me give you one example as a comparison. Before this period, in 2002 and 2007, the real effective exchange rate index of dollar was decreased 25%. But it happened in 5 or 6 years. Such 25 years of value loss has been realized in 5 or 6 years, but this 17% of increase in the real effective exchange rate index of US dollar has been accomplished only in 8 months. This is not a nightmare for us, because such kind of exchange rate movements are, of course, posing some question marks in our heads. But we know that these kinds of exchange rates maybe will provide balance in the global growth. In some parts of the world, some regions are fighting with the deflation problems, but this adjustment will of course provide some positive impacts too. And I will evaluate its impact on the Turkish economy as well. But in my presentation, I would like to mention to the midterm and the long-term vision of Turkey. The movement and the changes in the exchange rates are important, and we are sensitive to those. But the macroeconomic fundamentals of a country matters much more, because if your macroeconomic fundamentals are solid and sound, then when those crises are over, the attraction to your country will be increasing. The appeal of your country will be improving. But if your macroeconomic fundamentals are not solid and sound, you cannot solve your infrastructural problems at all. In my presentation, I will first of all speak about the political outlook, because political stability is very important for the economy of a country. Then I will speak about the priorities of our country and the reform agenda of our country. Then, if there is time left, I will speak about the macroeconomic outlook and the long-term prospects. Political stability matters a lot. We all know it. Because without political stability, it is not possible to conduct reform in a country. For example, in the actually the Central Europe, we saw that even without political stability, such reforms can be conducted, but this is not the case for Turkey. If you are going to make structural reforms, you have to have political stability. If these two factors are present, then you can have the sustainable growth. In the last 12 years, as a result of the political stability, many reforms have been implemented in Turkey. And the relative performance of the Turkey, although there were the economic crisis and many conflicts going on in the Middle East, the economic performance of the Turkey was relatively good. When I'm speaking about the political stability, I mean the same government without having huge problems should run the country. In the past, the average lifetime of the governments in Turkey was quite short, something like 15 months or 17 months. But starting from 2002, the political stability increased, and as a result of that, we can have long-term targets and long-term visions. Last year, we had local elections and the presidential elections. Within a democratic maturity, those elections have been completed. And 7th of June 2015, the parliamentary elections will be taking place in Turkey. If you assess the public polling and the public opinion, you will see that those public polling agencies claim that the Justice and Development Party will most probably have 45 or the 50% of the votes. That means that for another term, the political stability in Turkey will be preserved. Okay, we said political stability, but how can we make use of political stability in Turkey? Last year, as Turkey was busy with the elections, within the supervisions of Deputy Prime Minister Mr. Ali Babacan, we had a very busy schedule and we prepared a very comprehensive structural reform package. We know Turkey has many structural problems. Although we always announce that the economic performance of Turkey in the last 12 years have been comparatively good, but we still know that we are in need of structural reforms. And in order to do this, we prepared 25 transformation programs, 25 reform package. In the past, of course, many reform programs have been implemented both in Turkey and in other sides of the world. But before the Justice and Development Party came to power, all of the problems were focused on the chronic current account deficit and the chronic inflations, high real interest rates, and the public debts which cannot be sustainable, which cannot be managed, I'm sorry. These were the macroeconomic problems that we saw in the 1990s. But starting from 2000s, we started reform programs, and such macroeconomic problems have been tackled remarkably. You can say that the current account deficit is a problem in Turkey which cannot be manageable. Yes, I agree with you, but the current account deficit is actually stemming from the microeconomic problems because we have lower levels of domestic savings. and that this is actually a reason for such a problem. And in terms of hyperscale products, the technological advanced products, we are not a very productive country. Therefore, the current account deficit is indeed the reflection of the microeconomic problems. So this reform program is very suitable for tackling those problems. You can say that inflation rates are very high in Turkey because in Europe, for example, or in Japan, people are struggling with deflation. But here in Turkey, the inflation rates are over 7%. Of course, this is a problem. This is related with the monetary policy, but this inflation problem is actually stemming from the obstacles in front of the competition. Just think of a product. Let's assume that 1 kilogram of orange having the cost of 45 cents are being sold a couple of liras in the supermarkets. Why is this the case? Do we have problems in terms of logistic sense? Do we have any problems in terms of the transportation of the goods? We should ask those questions to ourselves. The inflation is persistently over 7%, and the underlying reason for that is actually the micro problems, not the macroeconomic problems. So this reform program has been prepared considering all of those factors. After 7th of June 2005, after that parliamentary election, we will have 4 years without election. We will not have presidential election, we will not have parliamentary election, or we will not have any local elections. So these 4 years without elections should be used in the optimum manner, and we should implement our reforms to the maximum extent. Long story short, we have 25 transformation program, and we have over 1,300 micro reforms. As you all know, we are a member of G20, and right now we are the president of the G20. Everybody is speaking about the reforms, everybody is speaking about an additional 2% of growth. But our reform program has an extraordinary attribute. First of all, in our program, we decided to identify which actions to be taken, who will take those actions, when those actions are taken, and what is the cost of such actions. We try to identify all of those factors. So in the literature, the timing and the sequencing of the reforms was quite sensitive for us. As a result of that, I can confidentially say that our reform program is a solid and sound program. Maybe you can check this program. You can say that there are many precautions to be taken. You can say that the details of the precautions are not very well illustrated. But let me say you this. We actually, in our program, briefly define the transformation program. The details of such titles, the subtitles of that 25 actually main topics are already prepared. Okay, Turkey has a growth of 3%. The growth rate of Europe is lower. The Asia is growing with a higher rate than us, but with a 3% of growth, we cannot abstain from middle income trap. So we should go beyond the 5% or 6% of growth. In today's world, it is not very easy. So in order to realize a 5% or 6% of growth, you should do some reforms. And while you are implementing those reform programs, we are not just wishing things to happen. The Prime Minister embraced that program, and this program has been embraced and welcomed on the cabinet level. And we listened to the business world and the NGOs while we are preparing that program. So nobody can say we were not involved in the preparation of that reform package. By the way, I can guarantee you that we will monitor the implementation phase of that program. I will not go into details about the transformation program because it is such a long list, but I just would like to mention the important ones. The macroeconomic stability will be our priority. This is important for us. Of course, in order to do this, we should have lower inflation, lower current account deficit, and maintaining the fiscal strength is really important. And we should protect the sound characteristics of the banking sector. These were our sensitivities in the past, and we will protect those attributes of Turkish economy. In the last 12 years, we always try to improve the macroeconomic performance of Turkey. In 2010, Turkey had a growth rate of 9% to 10%, but in 2011, do you think that the growth rate decreased to 2% just by a coincidence? No. We understand that this growth was not a sustainable growth. So we understood this. So we actually decelerated the pace of growth in Turkey for a specific purpose. I believe in the long term, the quality of the institutions are really important for an economy. If the central bank is not independent, then you cannot have a good economy. When the central bank was not, for example, independent in the past in Turkey, the central bank was always issuing new money. And this caused the increase in the sovereign debt for Turkish economy. I mean, we have the budget deficit, and its ratio to the national income was 11%. So at those times, the central bank was not independent, and since the central bank didn't have a priority in terms of price stability, we have actually very weak banking sector, and the growth rates were quite low in Turkey. So improving the quality of the institutions matter. And by the way, when I am saying institutions, I am not only meaning the Central Bank of Turkey. The rule of law and the other legal institutions are within the scope of the corporate quality. Turkey is not as bad as you think, but Turkey is not as good as you think, by the way. There is a progress in almost all chapters, but there is still a way, there is still a road to be covered. I really care about the European Union negotiation process, because when you just take a look around our neighbors, from where can we receive our inspirations? Are we going to take the northern countries as an inspiration? Are we going to actually take inspiration from the Middle East countries? No. So the biggest reference point for us and for the globe is the European Union. Because although European Union has many challenges, it is a great success story. I am not saying because Trichet is here with us, because European Union is a huge success story. Why? After World War II, the Second World War, they actually recovered so well that it is such a huge success story, because first of all they established the economic and monetary union, and they are trying to establish this political union right now. And after the Soviet bloc has collapsed, they integrated the Eastern European countries into their scope, and this real convergence has been actually implemented. And I believe the reforms in Turkey are directly correlated with the European Union process. So we should know that we can understand whether the corporate quality in Turkey is improving or not from the European Progress Report. I'm speaking about October 2004 Progress Report. As you know, there are 33 chapters that Turkey is negotiating with the European Union, and the European Commission says that Turkey has a progress in 30 chapters. Of course, they are criticizing us in some of the chapters, but they say, whether small or big, in 30 chapters, the Turkey has a progress. By the way, I read between the lines, and the European Commission says in its progress report, the legal structure of the Turkey is actually compliant with the advanced level of alignment, advanced level of European countries. So, as a result of all of those challenges, Turkey is progressing.
İradesi olsaydı, yani yeni üye alma.
If the European Union has a will to open its doors to a new country, if the European Union has a will to absorb such a big country like Turkey, if there is a favorable climate in the European Union right now, I believe that Turkey would have come to the last phases of the negotiation, because 26 or 27 chapters could have been opened. But in reality, right now, 14 chapters have been opened, one chapter is closed, and some of the chapters couldn't have been opened as a result of some political issues. But although these chapters have not been opened, it doesn't mean that the progress is not realized. Whether we are accepted to the European Union or not, it doesn't matter, but we should do this real convergence, and we should take the role model as from the Europe, and nominal convergence should also be implemented. And I believe this is the priority area for Turkey. So there are 25 reform areas, and these reforms will facilitate the European Union process, but this will also facilitate solving our problems. There are a couple of indicators for us. The Global Competitiveness Index. Just take a look to there, and you can see that Turkey progressed a lot. Turkey is on the actually 44th level. It doesn't suit us so much. We should go even beyond it. But after all, with comparison to the emerging economies, we are in a very good position, but we should develop more. In terms of corruption perception, however, we are not in the desired place. Maybe since 2002 to 2014, the numbers of the countries are increased. However, we still have that corruption problem. And in order to fight against the corruption, very recently our government prepared a program for fighting against the corruption, and very soon this program will be sent to the parliament. Lastly, the ease of doing business is another important reference. We progressed, but we should progress even further. Among 189 countries, we are in the 55th place, and this is a remarkable progress.
There is another important field. In order for Turkey to realize its potential, we have to resolve our own internal problems, primarily the Kurdish issue. Turkey has to make progress in order to overcome this problem. Complex ethnical problems in this region, I mean in the Middle East, cannot be resolved, as you can see. See the state of Syria. If the issue depends on ethnicity and sectarian differences, the end result is a chaos like Syria or Iraq, Yemen or Libya. This is quite important in itself. So what is Turkey trying to do in such a geographical region where ethnicities and sectarian issues are abundant? Turkey realizes that such problems cannot be resolved through constant conflict and battles. Turkey says, I am going to address the Kurdish issue on the axis of basic rights and within a democratic framework. I believe this is an important approach. Ethnically, I keep saying it, I am of Kurdish origin, and up until 7 years of age, I did not know a single word of Turkish. But at that time, there were also some strict bans. In our village, for example, we couldn't listen to Kurdish music, and it was forbidden to broadcast Kurdish music on the TVs or on the radios. It was impossible. Why was that? Because there was fear back then. But today, currently, we want to recognize all of these individual and collective rights. Organizational demands are something entirely different. There is a terrorist organization with its organizational rights. They are on a separate level. But individual basic rights of our Kurdish brothers and sisters are being addressed. We have taken so many steps, but we don't have time to mention all of them. If we base the solution in the axis of basic rights and democracy, what will the end result be? First of all, let me remind you that we have lost more than 40,000 people throughout the course of the conflict. Some people think our loss amounts to $1 billion on the financial side. And for the last year, the conflicts have stopped and negotiations have advanced quite a lot. And as you know, there is a disarmament call that was issued recently. This is why, probably for the first time, for the Middle East and the Caucasus region, Turkey might become an example in terms of the solution it is going to introduce. I believe in it because Turkey is not like Iraq or Syria. For instance, below Kirkuk and Mosul in Iraq, you don't have any Kurds. But the largest Kurdish population in Turkey is found in Istanbul, Ankara, and Izmir. It means we are like flesh and bone together. We coexist everywhere. In the past, there was a policy of ignoring Kurdish people, and we are now paying the bill of those eras. But during our government, this politic approach was abolished. And what will happen if the issue is going to be resolved? As I am an economist, I will have to name some numbers. I believe that if the issue is resolved, in the next decades, Turkey is going to get an additional 1% growth rate. Why do I think like that? I am the deputy representing Batman. It is a province with a population of 550,000 people. 60% of the population is below 20 years of age. Can you think about this demographic structure? It is possible to fuel growth with this young population, for example. Let me name another example. In 2002, there was no export from Batman. Prior to the Iraqi crisis, however, it went up to $100 million. But you might think that this is a low number, but it came from scratch, and in the organized industrial zone, now we have no vacancies. We want to establish new ones in order to meet the demand. What I would like to tell you is that once peace is established, once the environment is one of peace, everything may be possible. We are investing in the region, and peace may render this region, the southern and eastern Anatolian regions capable of fueling Turkey's economy. I soundly believe in that it can happen. Therefore, this estimation is not exaggerated. In addition, this region is abundant with resources, energy resources. The Kurdistan region of Iraq, for example, is one of our biggest commercial partners. Last year, if I'm not mistaken, we sold goods to Iraq accounting to $11 billion, for example. If this chaos environment goes away, our exports to the region will be quadrupled maybe. It will go beyond this current figure. Because transacting with the northern part of Iraq means you are transacting with people of around the same culture. This is why we have advantages and possibilities sitting there, and we may, through these transactions, decrease current deficit. Well, human capital is our biggest resource. We don't have natural gas, we don't have oil, so we have to invest in our human base. This is significant in itself. I'm not saying this myself. Think about income per capita and education. There is a strong correlation between. This graphic shows how many years are spent by people above the age of 25 and its logarithmic relation to purchasing power and income per capita. We have a higher income level when compared to what usually had to be in comparison to our education level. Also, make a comparison with the former Soviet Union countries. Their income per capita is far lower when compared to their education level because the entrepreneurship spirit is not so strong in there. This means if we can achieve the OECD average figures in education, then our income per capita is going to get a further boost. This is what this graphical chart shows. Our government also increased the mandatory education period to 12 years. Currently, in the next years, for the population above the age of 25, the average years of attending school is going to be 14 years at minimum. And I believe the OECD average is 11 years. This means that we have taken correct steps, but we are not at the desired level of educational quality. About one-fifth of our budget is allocated to education, and compared to 2002, it has doubled and increased to 19% ratio-wise. There is also a big increase in schooling grades from preschool to higher education. You will see that we have addressed the issue, although we are still lacking a little bit in terms of quality. Some other programs are being launched, especially. This chart is about quality, by the way. It shows the average values of OECD and Turkey's PISA average rates. If you take a look, you will see that we are catching up with the OECD, although we still have a lot to do. Therefore, there is still a lot of room for progress. This is why education is one of our primary reform areas. Infrastructure is quite important too. Whatever you may say, without infrastructure there can't be development. So, for that purpose, our government has been spending $220 billion in the last 12 years on infrastructure. We have a simple map here. I showed this one to you last year as well, but it is striking. You can see the highway network of Turkey at the beginning of 2003, and in the map below you see the highway network as of October 2014. We have invested a lot in the road network and tackled our bottlenecks. Now we are building railway lines for express trains. There is a lot of investment on the way. We are taking Germany as an example. Still, we have also more than doubled our figures in airports. Particularly in the field of infrastructure, Turkey has scaled a large distance, and we are either planning or currently implementing some of the greatest projects of the century. These are still in progress and about to be completed. Some of them are in the beginning, but some of them are going to be completed within the next several years. We did not invest only in roads and railways or maritime networks. We also invested in the informatics infrastructure. Therefore, although we used to remain around the figure of 40 in terms of competitive power and such, now we are ranking in the top 30 in logistics. Of course, we are aiming for the top 15 and turning Turkey into a logistics hub. One of our programs is aimed at converting transportation into logistics. We have some key targets in the healthcare sector. We are the sixth biggest market of tourism around the world, and last year we received a tourist influx of 42 million people, and we ranked sixth in that term. We gained $32 billion from that. Now we want to become an export base in terms of medicine and healthcare services. I will not go into the details, but our healthcare system improved greatly. There is competition between the private and public sectors, and this interaction will help us turn Turkey into a medical tourism hub. Mr. Konukoğlu will know and must also be benefiting from it. Last year, we made a decision. If you are getting $100 for treatment of foreigners, you can deduct $50 of that from the tax basis. This is a great incentive. I know that in Izmir, for example, hospitals are receiving only Libyan patients. So, this is just an example for you to understand. Efficiency is a big problem of Turkey. Labor efficiency increased in recent years, although not as much as we wish it to be. Especially between 2002 and 2007, both labor efficiency and factory efficiency increased a lot. Now we are slowing down. This means we require a reform in the employment market, just like Europe does. Let me be honest with you here. We have undertaken a lot of reforms, and one of the rare areas where we couldn't make a lot of progress is this area. This is self-criticism. We have not made a lot of progress in terms of having a flexible labor market. Currently, we have a draft proposal in the parliament about part-time working among females in order to increase their labor market participation rates. And employment unions are not helping us at that point. They want labor rights to be protected, but we cannot continue to go on with this labor market. This is going to be one of the biggest reform areas for us. It is indispensable that we make it more flexible. I would like to underline this. But while doing that, we need a lot of accompanying reforms from the industrial area to education. We already have a strategy in place. This is a graphical chart from the OECD. Turkey has the rigidest labor market regime of OECD. This is not what we say, this is what they say. But we cannot go on like this. To increase employment rates, we have to come up with reforms. But there is an increasing trend though. Female labor participation rates are low, but they increased sharply in the last decade, which is nice because where half of the population is not active in the economy, you cannot rank among the first class economies. Thus, we have to increase female labor participation rates even further, most possibly through better education. Here is a graphical chart showing labor participation rates of females. Among university graduates, it's around 4%, but among primary school or high school and secondary school graduates, it's 25%. Among illiterate females, it's 16%. So it is understood that as higher education access increases, female participation rate in labor is going to get a boost too. This is both good and bad news because our working population increases by 2% every year. This means that we are going to have an influx of more than 1 million people each year. If we can increase female participation rate at the same percentage, this will mean that if we don't make a reform, that we will have even higher unemployment rates. So, such a reform package should be guaranteed to be implemented because of the dimensions and dynamics of the labor market. If we can't implement such a program, the political cost of it will be quite grave. So will the consequences be. Maybe we can survive, but by the year 2020 you will stumble upon the unemployment wall too. Maybe I may not be in the same position in the next years, but this program is going to be absolutely implemented. These reforms will be put in place. We don't have any other option politically. I'm not speaking economically here. Last year, 1,430,000 people were employed. This is quite a large figure. But what happened? Unemployment numbers went up by 1 point. But why? What underlies this problem is the increase of working population. Population at working age and low labor participation rates. But we shouldn't be worried because it is going to be mandatory for us to come up with reforms in this area. This is my most basic message of today. Once labor participation rates increase in Turkey, we will soon be covering the gap between us and the West, and the precondition for that is to increase employment and labor participation rates, which will reduce the rate we call dependency rate. Your labor market needs to be flexible. We have already said that, but you need to have capital markets with a deep structure just like that of USA. This is the reason why USA keeps succeeding, although they have quite a large population, over 350 million. This means we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We will render the labor market flexible and the capital markets deeper. I'm not going to drown you in details. You can see these graphics and slides later on our website. But you will instantly realize that there is a progress, although we have troubles in financial intermediation. Public offerings are not at the level we desire them to be, so that is an area of improvement too. We took a lot of steps forward and they are yielding their fruits right now. This is the Global Financial Centers Index. We used to be 72nd in 2009 and reaching 42nd in 2014. We aspire to become 25th by 2018, and in the Financial Development Index we made a lot of progress too, and I believe by 2018 we are going to rank 30th. Energy efficiency is substantially important. We are dependent on foreign resources for energy. You will initially think about the primary fuel resources like oil and natural gas, and we are foreign dependent by 74%. Last year we spent around $56 billion on energy, and our current deficit is around $42 billion. We cannot go on like this. So I think that we have to put more emphasis on renewable energy resources. Do we do it? This is proof that we do. In recent years, in terms of installed capacity, we have been increasing by 6.5 thousand megawatts a year, and most of that comes from hydroelectric plants, coal and renewable energy sources. But soon we are going to stop offering incentives for natural gas, for example. We will channel our incentives towards renewable energy sources to reduce the external dependency. Another point is that we are far behind the added value chain. What do we have to do? We need to eliminate this problem as soon as possible through making investments into research and development. The R&D investments in respect to the national income is lower than 1%. Better countries, as you can see, have far higher values. We first aspire to catch up with Europe and do better. For that purpose, we are offering great incentives for the private sector. If you find a patent and commercialize it, we offer 50% of your earnings as a deduction from your tax basis. This is another good incentive for research and development. States' R&D spendings have already been increasing, and we are not far from Europe in terms of that. But the private sector is falling short of Western standards. So what is there in this transformation program? One of the biggest components is about increasing Turkey's rankings in the value chain. Progress is being made, especially in terms of industrial design and brandization, and even in the number of patent applications. However, it is obvious as day that we are still lacking in these numbers. Although industrial design is at a fine level, patent applications are falling short. You can do all of this, but shadow economy is still going to be there. Informalities will persist. You cannot afford that. You have to struggle with full force, and this is a priority in our agenda. A lot of steps are being taken, and an action plan is in place. We want to decrease informal economy by 5 points, as well as informal employment, in which we secured a lot of reduction. But still, 1/3 of all our employed citizens are employed informally. Therefore, further efforts are required. I know I am taking a lot of your time, but I want to talk about the next year now, briefly. I will keep it short. This year our growth started a little slow. I mean, primary indicators are not so positive at this time. Maybe it is because of fluctuation in the markets, or maybe it is because of the pre-election delays in consumption patterns. Some other factors could be thought of, but we realized that our kick-starting move was slow. Here is my own scenario. After the elections, if the public surveys are correct, if the Justice and Development Party is going to still be victorious like it used to be in the past, under this presumption, I believe that private sector investments, which had been slowing down, are going to get a speed boost, and delayed consumption is going to revitalize. We are receiving positive signals from the European Union because European central banks' monetary expansion is important. This may not probably solve structural problems, but just as it is in the USA, it will inevitably contribute to revitalization of economy, because it is impossible to get any positive consequences from that. So, in line with that, there will be a recovery in Europe too, although we cannot, on the other side of the map, foresee and estimate geopolitical conflicts. You see what Middle East is struggling with. There is a constant war with IS, and there is progress in that too. Although we cannot estimate the future of Syria, there are problems reigning over Libya too. Despite all that, I believe we cannot do any worse than last year. There is also an ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine in the north, but we can't estimate the course of things in the future. So, as I have already said, we have already left behind a geopolitically bad situation. There was a stagnation, a long-term one in Europe, and hopefully there will be recovery. Signals are positive. And if that happens, I am confident that with the impact of external demand and revitalization of domestic demands, also with the influence of decreases in oil prices and contraction of current deficit, Turkish economy may recover and start growing better. Last year our growth rate was around 3%, I'm not sure. By the end of the month of March, we are going to be sure about the final figures, and we believe we will get closer to 4% by the end of the year. But if these presumptions do not come true, of course, growth rate might be smaller. But let me remind you that the first quarter's figures should not be taken as reference. I will skip growth rate We are now following a balanced growth rate, and considering other regions except for Asia, we have a fine growth rate. As I said, commodity prices are going to be lowering. This will also support our growth, and slower recovery in the European side is a bad impact on us. Here is a question. Is Turkey ready for the Fed rate hike? Is anyone ready for this actually? Assets are going to be repriced, and this will cause a serious level of volatility in the markets. We are actually experiencing this at the moment. But I still believe that in the end, all of this smoke will be gone, and when they turn back and take a look, they will have to see the basic indicators of Turkey, from demographic structure to reforms and awareness of the issues at hand, or the capability of coming up with solutions. Problems are still present in Brazil, in China, everywhere in the world, in Japan, for example, in the USA. Here is what I'm trying to say. There are problems that is not to be denied, but an investor should see whether the country is aware of the issues at hand, whether governors are realizing it and coming up with solutions. Is there a willpower towards making reforms? I believe that these are more basic points to take into consideration. I usually do not talk about the fluctuations in the foreign exchange market. You will know it if you have listened to me before, because it is not foreseeable. You may have a Nobel Prize prize in economy, but you still cannot estimate exactly the magnitude and timing. So, back to the question, is Turkey ready? The volatility and fluctuation in markets is inevitable. That is not something new. But I am confident that a monetary expansion in Europe is going to have a positive influence, because 75% of foreign exchange flowing into Turkey comes from Europe. Also, a large portion of syndicated loans come from Europe. You have to realize the importance. A recovery in Europe will positively influence Turkey. We are closely tied to Europe in terms of our fate. In the real estate sector, I don't believe there is a booming effect, a balloon effect. I don't foresee such a thing. So, what is there to talk about? You may ask, if that is the state, why is Turkey influenced at such an extent? Go back to December or January, you will see that Turkey was at the sweet spot, at the best condition. How was it? Turkey has two problems. On macro level, we have a current deficit and we have inflation. What happened? Oil prices went down. The government announced a reform package, and there is a strong opinion about political power. What happened? Portfolio investments started to flow into Turkey, because Turkey, China, and India were going to be the countries to benefit from the oil price reduction the most. This means this is one of the dimensions of influence in Turkey. As of today, however, we don't have an excessive influence of portfolio investments, although there is a certain extent. We are not being advised or defined as overweight. I mean, the fluctuation may not be any worse than that. I talked about employment already and participation rates. Now I will talk about inflation.
You know very well about the inflation. In the past, we know Turkey was struggling and fighting against the 2 digits of inflation. Every government, when they came to the office, they promised that we will actually reduce the inflation below 10%. Of course, we reduced the inflation below 10%, but 7% or 8% of inflation is not good. If you want a bigger growth, this inflation rates should be below 5%. And in order to do this, we should do some reforms, and the central banks should be supported, and the credibility of the central bank should be increased. But on behalf, as a Ministry of Finance, I support the central banks, and we have such a strict fiscal policy in order to strengthen the central bank position. You know the debt ratio of Turkey to its national income, it is just in 30%, but we are still supporting the central banks in terms of fighting against the inflation and the current account deficit. Of course, the devaluation of the Turkish lira is a risk for us. But since the commodity prices are decreasing and since there is a normalization process in the food prices, we still have some advantages. You know that the inflation issues, $10 of decline in the energy prices affected this situation. Fiscal position remains strong. Excluding 2009, we are actually compliant with the Maastricht criteria, and we have a target of budget surplus. I don't know whether we will be successful or not, but this is our target. But I do believe that this strong and strict fiscal policy is in the favor of Turkey, because through those fiscal policies, we are fighting against the inflation rates, and also we are fighting against the current account deficit. So we do need a fiscal space. This is the projection for 2015. In 2014, our current account deficit, the budget deficit, was the 0.7% of the national income, but there are still some downgrading risk. We have the target of 0.5% for the budget deficit. We have progress, but we should be careful. And this big public debt stock was 33%, but we would like to reduce it up to 28%. If you compare this debt with the other emerging countries, you will see that Turkey is in a better position by 32%. McKinsey evaluated the household debt and the governmental debt, so the total debt was actually evaluated. So the total leverage was assessed. In many of the categories, Turkey was the 7th or the 8th best country in many sectors. So Turkey is quite good, and Turkey has a relatively low leverage. I will not go into its details. In terms of current account deficit, there is a narrowing, but we still have to progress. If the oil prices are kept on the level of $60, we believe that the current account deficit can be reduced to 4%. And we believe that the Turkey will be growing by 4 or 4% if the current account deficit as such. In terms of the financing of the current account deficit, there is an improvement, and we are projecting that improvement to be continuing. We said that our fates with the European Union is similar. We know that the European growth will have a direct correlation to our exports to the EU, because once the European Union recovers, our economy will be improving as well. I will not go into details, as I said before. We know that the lower energy prices has a huge impact. $10 of decline in the energy prices leads to 0.5 points of improvement in the current account deficit GDP ratio. With regards to the foreign exchange position of Turkey, there are some question marks. The government do not have a deficit in terms of foreign exchange, and there are actually some positive effects. But of course, if our economy is negatively impacted by this, the government stock will be negatively impacted. The actually household has a surplus with regards to foreign exchange position. Actually, the companies do not have a foreign exchange debt, but 88% actually have a return from their foreign exchange. So who is lending money to those companies? Especially, I believe that these companies who have the foreign exchange actually deficit are most probably the small or medium scaled enterprises. This is our projections, but this is a serious issue for us, and we are evaluating this situation. There is a draft law waiting in the parliament. We say that if you increase your capital, we will have actually provide you an advantage to deduct those increase in capital. So we will protect the capital against taxation. This is going to be our incentive. Our system is actually encouraging to take loans right now, and you are adding the costs of the interests to your taxation. So this is the system. But if you increase your capital, then we will provide you an incentive, and you all know that this draft law is waiting in the parliament right now, because we know that the challenges can be manageable right now, but we don't want our companies to take huge loans, huge borrowings. We solved out the problem of governmental borrowing, but the private sector borrowing problem, we don't want this. So we will provide incentives to them. I mean, we will try to put local capital, and we will try to provide an incentive to the local capital increase. Of course, we have a low household leverage, and as you all know, our citizens cannot borrow with the foreign exchanges, with the foreign money. So especially the household sector has been abolished to borrow with the foreign currency. So we don't want this volatility in the foreign exchanges to be reflected to the household sector. So the household sector is not negatively affected by this. What about the long-term prospects? In the long term, of course, we will see what happens, but I would like to, actually Keynes said this is not me speaking, but 1990s are actually the term in which we lost a lot. We have political instability, we have huge inflation rates. But starting from 2000s, although there are some upsides and downs, we can generally say that Turkey was a success story. I mean, if you compare it with the emerging Europe, the Latin American countries, and also the Middle Eastern countries, Turkey was a success story. Asia was better than us, I admit that. But in order to close the gap with the Asian economies, you should increase domestic savings. That is why these reform programs are quite important. At the beginning of 2000, Actually, the purchasing power per capita was about 30%, but right now it is in 55%. So we are in a convergence period with the European Union. Hopefully, through such reforms, we will eradicate that gap with the European Union. In some of the cities of Turkey, like Istanbul and Ankara, is actually having the purchasing power per capita of 70 or 80% of the Central European countries. The quality of the institutions matter. European Union process matters. We will implement more reforms. I speak about the advantages of the demographics of Turkey in my speech and productivity. And in order to realize productivity, we are in need of investment and reforms. More reform, more investments, we have the demographics, and if we can improve the quality of the institutions, then hopefully we will actually enable Turkey to compete in the first league. Here you see our favorable demographics. If you compare it with the OECD countries, you will see that the population is growing 3 times faster. But how can we improve the productivity? We should invest in people, we should invest in R&D, we should actually increase our investment in total. We have the formula and we will be successful. 2023 targets are quite ambitious targets. Maybe those targets are not easy to be implemented, but you should raise the bar and you should set the huge actually targets. If the United States didn't have the target of going to the moon, do you think that they would have gone to the moon? So you should set your goals and you should try out your best to realize those goals. Because in order to do this, you should have the right program. I mean, in which position we will be in the future is directly related with the global issues. These are not my numbers, by the way. These figures are taken by the international finance institutions. Maybe when it is 2050, Turkey will reach to 50,000 US dollars GDP per capita. I know this was a very long presentation. Since I am the last speaker, this is an advantage for me. If you give me the permission to speak last, then I can speak longer. If I bore you, I apologize, but thank you very much for listening.
Sayın Bakanım diyor ki soru cevap var.
Is there a question and answer session? If you have questions, we can take your questions. I believe there is no question from the audience. Thank you. Thank you so much. Distinguished participants, next year we hope to see you in the next summit 2016. Thank you very much for your participation and for your energy, and I would like to say congratulations because our teams were working day and night. We would like to thank to our sponsors. See you next year.